Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you, and today I'm going to be doing something that I don't normally do. That is, I'm going to be talking about things I think should be on the ban list. Now, this is actually something that I have noticed, like, in general, in my time being in Yu-Gi-Oh! And other card games, but especially lately, as the TCG is currently in a format that not too many people are particularly pleased with when it comes to which decks are good and for what reasons. And that's there's, like, in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community in particular, there is much more of an emphasis from the fans on this stuff should be banned. Let's make our own ban list that'll fix the format. And I think that a lot of the reason this stems from the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the few card games, I don't know about few, but it's one of the card games that doesn't have rotation officially, but between power creep of sets as they continue to come out and also the ban list, Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically does have functioning rotation. If you really think about it, like, I've often heard people say, like, oh, it would be nice if Yu-Gi-Oh! Did rotation with the last, couple of years of sets maybe, and then also they just reprint staples in these sets, kind of like they do in Magic, so that way we have staples as a format. And I'm like, that's literally what it is right now. Like, if you really think about it, decks kind of naturally rotate out, if not due to power level, something like Sword Soul, then they'll get forced out due to the ban list, looking at something like Sprite, with a limiting of, like, Nimble Beaver and stuff, right? So I think that's why Yu-Gi-Oh! Players care so much about what they think should be on the ban list, right? Because it really does affect the course of our game a lot more than ban lists tend to affect other card games. Now, I am not going to make the claim that I know how to fix the Master Duel format. We'll talk about this in a second, but I don't even know if the format really needs that much fixing. Which I know, like, a lot of Yu-Gi-Tubers do, which on, like, Twitter and stuff have kind of, like, griped at people, not directly at people, but in general about, like, oh, everyone thinks they know how to fix the format. Everyone's coming up with their own ban list. So I'm not saying that I can fix the format. This is more of a wish list for me than anything else. I know, due to the nature of this kind of discourse, that there are going to be people who disagree with me, and I welcome that. That is completely fine. If you agree or disagree, feel free to let me in the comments. As always, though, and I make this disclaimer for the tier list too, just don't be an asshole. Just don't be rude about it. Discourse is fun, but rudeness is not. So that's really all that I ask here. So with that respect here, the other thing I wanted to talk about before I go into it here is that I'm going to be making a ban list wish list for the current Master Duel format. I know if I don't make this disclaimer and I throw up the ban list, I'll still probably people have say stuff like, how is Beatrice not on your ban list? Are you not worried about Fiendsmith? And it's like, no, because we don't know when that's coming out in Master Duel, and it probably won't be for quite some time. There are other hits we can talk about when stuff like Fiendsmith and Tenpai comes into Master Duel, but I'm focusing on the current Master Duel format. So, speaking of the current Master Duel format, I thought it might behoove us to go over here on Untapped and kind of take a look at the current format. Untapped, as always, when it comes to analyzing specifically ranked ladder on Master Duel, is my resource of choice, because we can sort by Diamond and Master games only, and we have a huge sample of 100,000 games to take a look at the meta and analyze it from. And this is also something that we've seen in tournament top cuts as well over on, like, Master Duel meta, right? We are actually in a very diverse format in Master Duel right now. Even as time has gone on, I'm starting to see less and less people making the claim that, oh, no, Snake Eye is still tier 0 in Master Duel. I mean, there was that point you could have made back when Ash and Wanted and Bonfire were all at 3, but Fire King Snake Eye right now is certainly a far cry from tier 0. And I think we can agree the same is true of Yubel as well. Even if it does still see quite a bit of play, I am still surprised by Yubel's popularity overall, but it is an anime deck that's very meta relevant, and again, I think people as a whole tend to be a little bit bored of Snake Eye, so I still think that's the most likely explanation, but I am still quite surprised to see 18.5% for Yubel. But anyway, my main point in all this is to kind of demonstrate that, like, we are already in an extremely diverse Master Duel format. And I really value deck diversity in any given meta, right? I think that that is a sign of a healthy meta. I remember I made a video relatively recently that said, you know, the meta is diverse and healthy, and I can prove it. And while a lot of people agree that the meta was diverse, I saw a lot of people saying, well, it's not healthy though, because insert deck I don't like still exists. And I don't know, like, I think there is an argument to be made of, like, you know, if you don't like one card combos or need to have multiple hand traps, then maybe the format might not be healthy in your perspective. But I kind of see that as, like, just another instance of power creep. Like, it's something that's going to be ultimately very unavoidable. So, like, you know, there does come a point where I think if Yu-Gi-Oh! Gets too power crept for you, then maybe it is just time to play a different game. But I don't think that using a ban list to ban like 100 cards and attempt to hard reset the game is the way to go about it. Because I like modern Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it's valid to not like one card combos and needing multiple hand traps, but I actually like where Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at right now, and I have fun playing it, so I'm not looking to destroy that necessarily. Really, I think this is just an exemplary example. I think this is just a good example of how Yu-Gi-Oh! Needs more alt formats, right? Because again, I don't think the desire to want to play differently is invalid, not by any means. In fact, that's a desire that I also have as well, despite liking where modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is at. You know, I do also think that we need more ways to play the game. So that's kind of my take on the current meta. So my ban list isn't wish list. My ban list wish list isn't going to be like huge or anything, because I really don't think we need an overhaul in the Master Duel meta right now. I was going to start talking about specifics, but let's actually just swap on over to the ban list now, which I'm sure you're all pretty eager to see. So I'll show you what I'm cooking up here. Okay, so here it is, in all its glory. This is my ban list wish list for Master Duel right now. Now, I do want to throw out another kind of caveat here that, especially when it comes to the unlimited section, I think there are more cards that could come off of the ban list and they would be completely fine. But rather than throw a bunch of at least somewhat experimental limits on, or just cards I don't really care about, like Time Seal, Trap Dust Shoot, Ultimate Offering. These are like older trap cards that are banned that would probably be fine at 1, but I'm also not really that eager to see them come back. Like, I don't really care if they do or don't come back. So I wanted to kind of keep it to stuff that I really proactively care about seeing either get hit or come off the list, right? So, again, there are other things that are currently on the list I think could come off that I just did not feature here because I don't really care that much. I don't think they'd have that much of an impact anyway. Geez, I guess we'll start with Forbidden, because I think the cards that are Forbidden up here are going to dictate a lot of the other hits following. So, first Forbidden card I have on the docket is Ronin Totem. Now, this is not one that is like super desperately needed. This is definitely just me being a Sprite enthusiast and having a lot of opinions about how Sprite is balanced in Master Duel. That is to say, I actually think Sprite is pretty well managed in Master Duel. It's the only format where Sprite Elf is still legal, but I also think Elf is completely fine. Like, it's definitely not causing any like major issues at all in Master Duel. In fact, like, outside of, like, Sprite, what deck even plays Elf? You know, sometimes Monadium, sometimes Super Heavy Samurai pile decks, you know? Sometimes Yubel very occasionally, I think. Sometimes pure Snake Eye very occasionally. It's like, you know, Elf is not out here breaking the format, right? So I don't think that needs to be addressed. So the reason that I have Ronin Totem at 0 is because I think by banning Ronin Totem, we could see a world where Swap Frog comes back to 3. And this one, okay, this limit of Totally Awesome is like my most tenuous one, where I'm willing to be wrong about any of this, but of all of these hits, I think I'm most willing to be wrong about Totally Awesome. There might just be a world where even with Ronin ban, Totally is still too good to be allowed, but the card definitely becomes more difficult to make in a deck like Sprite with the Ronin Totem banned, right? And, you know, Totally plus Sprite Elf has always been kind of like, I guess, I don't know, I don't want to say fearmonger, because I do think it is a really good interaction, but of being able to negate and then bring back and then negate again. But, you know, the interaction of Totally plus Elf has always been what people have cited as that's why Elf either needs to get banned or why Totally can never come back. But, again, I'm willing to believe that in a world where Ronin exists and the Totally is that much harder to make in a Sprite deck, where it's actually fine, and, like, even if you do jump through the hoops of making Totally and then having the elf and all that stuff, like, is that really that OP compared to modern Yu-Gi-Oh? And especially what's going to be coming out? I don't know. I kind of don't know that it is. I kind of think it's about on par with the current power level. So, yeah, I think if Ronin goes to 0, then Swap can definitely come back to 3. No questions asked. And I think Totally could probably come back. But this one, again, I'm very, more so than other things on here, willing to be wrong about this one. Okay, next ban, and this is one I've talked about quite a bit, and I know some people are going to disagree with me, but I also think that the argument those people had has less of a foothold now. Can we just ban Albion Sanctifier already? Like, if you look at Master Duel tournament tops within the last, like, 2 weeks, like, since the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare and Ido got banned, like, there are still Albion Sanctifier locks showing up in multiple tournament top cuts where now they're just summoning Christia. Or I've personally encountered in Upper Master Ladder, people Albion locking with the DDD Vice King Requiem. I know that people can do it with the Archfiend Emperor that locks you into Fiends as well. Now, I'm not saying that this is always the case, but this is definitely another case of, like, the tuners aren't the problem, Hulk is, right? Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's always the enabler, not the targets, but this is definitely an example of where it is true. And the thing that's always so frustrating about Albion Sanctifier is that it would have been so easy to errata, or not errata, but to just fix when they made it in general, which is to just simply negate the effects of whatever you summon to your opponent's field, right? And the thing that really gets to me about Albion Sanctifier is that Konami knows that this design space has problems, right? That's why last time they banned Branded Expulsion and didn't hit Ido or Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, right? Because they knew that, oh, if there's gonna be more targets, right? So that's why they banned Expulsion last time. So, and I don't know why they're dodging it with Sanctifier this time. Could be because Sanctifier is a UR, although I think that's pretty flimsy reasoning. I think it's probably pretty likely because Sanctifier does have some actual application outside of branded locking, which I fully acknowledge. And, you know, it does kind of suck that branded loses out on that. At the same time, you're not branded players. You're not hurting for boss monsters. You have 29 other ones that are right at your disposal, and definitely other plays that you can make under Max C, right? Like, I see people kind of say, like, oh no, if we don't have Albion Sanctifier, Branded just always loses to Max C. And it's like, yeah, because Branded was never a top tier deck before Albion Sanctifier came out. It was just always losing to Max C left and right, and that was completely gatekeeping it out of the meta, right? So, I don't know. I'm pretty vocal about this. I've been pretty vocal about this. Sanctifier just needs to go. And I even said, when Gimmick Puppet Nightmare and Ido first got banned, I even said I was willing to be wrong, and if there are no more branded locks, that I will fully admit I was wrong. But I also said in that video that if there were more branded locks, I was gonna throw on my I told you so hat, and here it is. My hat is on in full force. I think that if the Sanctifier gets banned, there's no reasons for cards like Ido or Gimmick Puppet Nightmare to be banned. And while these two cards don't really see any particular play outside of locking, you know, other stuff that Gimmick Puppets, or Branded rather, is locking with, the other stuff that Branded is locking with does definitely see play in other decks. Archlord Christia is a very prominent fairy card that would just not be able to support fairy decks anymore if it got banned. DDD Vice King Requiem, so important for not only DDD but also for Unchained. That deck gets super hit if that card gets banned. Archfiend Emperor. At this point, we're just targeting casual decks and banning their cards to not ban Albion Sanctifier. I've also seen people say too, and I hate this argument about Albion Sanctifier. I've seen people say like, oh well, if they're playing Vice King Requiem, you just play Deus Machinax in your extra deck. And I'm like, no. Why is that an acceptable solution in a best of one format especially? It's not. It's really not. I've also seen people say that like, oh, well, if you're just locked into Fiend monsters, you know, that's not that big of a deal. And it's like, what are you talking about? The thing that irks me about that is the same people that I've seen say that are also like saying that, oh, how could they ever bring back Protoss? It's so disgusting. They have to ban it. And it's like, that's such clear favoritism I can't even begin to describe. How could you possibly think that locking somebody into Fiend summons is okay, but locking somebody out of one attribute is totally, like, egregiously horrible because you're a hypocrite who wants to keep Sanctifier out? Like, I don't know, that was a little harsh. That was a little harsh of me, but I really don't see any other reason why that logic would run through. So, anyway, Sanctifier just needs to go. And if it goes, the targets can be at 3, because these cards do nothing without Sanctifier. Again, almost like this card's a problem or something. Another somewhat controversial hit, I actually talked about this in a very recent video where I covered Snake Eye. I think that Promethean Princess is the card in Fire decks that needs to go. And here's my reasoning for this, right? Look at Fire King Snake Eye right now. Or more specifically, look at Snake Eye and Fire King without one another. Like, Snake Eye Pure is a tier 3 deck, right? Maybe lower tier 2 at best. It is definitely by far not the best thing you could be doing in Master Duel, even if it is still a pretty good deck. And it's pretty clear that the limit of Ash and Wanted has not only caused major consistency issues, but also now has affected the deck's resource loop in the long game, right? And then Fire King, I don't even think I need to talk about why none of the Fire King cards should be hit, because Pure Fire King is a deck that is like, you know, upper rogue at the absolute best, right? So what makes these decks greater than the sum of their parts? I think the answer is actually Promethean Princess. Now, again, the major argument against this ban, which I do think there is validity to, by the way, is that banning Promethean Princess hurts other fire decks as well. That is very true. However, and as I've said before, I think other fire decks don't rely nearly as much on Promethean Princess as Snake Eye does in particular, right? You know, Salamangreat, I think, is probably the biggest culprit that does rely on Promethean Princess quite a bit. But as we saw in the Fusion and Link Festival a few months ago, where Promethean Princess was banned, Salad was not only still playable, but had a huge variety of pretty good combo lines without Promethean Princess. Like, we have seen firsthand, because I played that deck in that festival, we have seen firsthand that Salad can have solid lines without Prom Princess. And then you start thinking about other fire decks, like Rescue Ace. Well, of course, Rescue Ace can do everything it already does without Promethean Princess. The same is actually true of Infernoble Knights, because Infernoble Knight does not make Promethean Princess until the very end of its combo line, and really only does it to set that up as more interaction in the graveyard. I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, I like the idea of a card like Promethean Princess in theory. Just a good generic card that can support a relatively, up before its release, up till that point, a relatively under-supported attribute. But Promethean Princess just has too many things about it that are too good. For like 5 things off the top of my head, right? Why are its materials completely generic? It should have required a fire monster. Why does it only firelock while it's in the field? It should firelock for the whole turn. Why does it have 2,700 attack points on a Link 3? That's completely generic. That's really, really high and really, really easy to get into. Why is this graveyard summon recursion effect a quick effect? And also, why does it pop a monster on the field? Imagine if Chaos Ruler popped a monster when it brought itself back and could do that as a quick effect. That would be absolutely insane. It's just, it's too much. Everything about Promethean Princess is too overtuned, and I think it's time for it to go. I mean, even think about Snake Eye, right? Snake Eye is a deck that would definitely need to rework its lines by quite a bit without Promethean Princess, but would still have some amount of plays available, and it would definitely be not as impactful, right? I think the best case scenario you could pull off with, like, a 1-card combo plus an extender would be to set up, like, Appaloosa plus Flambridge with the IP in the spell trap, and it's like, but that's already pretty much what you have to deal with anyway, and then you don't have the Promethean Princess in the graveyard. How many times playing against Snake Eye have you been so close to breaking their board, but you couldn't because the last piece you need to get in play was popped by Promethean Princess? That's happened to me so many times I can't even tell you. So yeah, I think that's why Promethean Princess is the card that needs to get hit. Again, I understand why people like it, and I like the idea of Prom Princess. I think the execution was just not there. So, okay, there's all the bans. Now let's go into the limits. A lot of these limits are actually, in fact, a lot of the ban lists from here on out is more me bringing stuff back than actually hitting stuff. Because again, I don't think that many things need to get hit in this format. White Dragon Wyverburster. Why did Dragon Link have to get that hit that hard? Why did they semi-limit Chaos Space just to ban Wyverburster on the next list, right? Dragon Link was not a deck that was dominating the format even when Wyvern Burster and Chaos Ruler got banned. Chaos Ruler getting banned was actually, I think, enough of a hit to Dragon Link, which was already a tier 2 to 3 deck, right? But Dragon Link is just such a cool and interesting deck. This is one of those ban list hits where Konami was like, you know, this is Konami effectively using the ban list as a means of rotation, right? Because Dragon Link was not too powerful, it was just simply time for us all to buy new decks, right? So that's why Wyvern Burster got banned. I would love to see it come back to 1. I think that would be completely fine. I think that Dragon Link would be much more playable and not any more of a problem with Wyvern Burster at 1. I think a lot of people can agree with that. This one I expect a lot of people to disagree with, Block Dragon coming back to 1, but Block Dragon has been at 1 in the OCG, like, the entire time. Like, I don't think that card ever got banned once in the OCG. And, like, when was the last time we saw Adamancipator anywhere near a Road of the King meta report, right? It's been years. It's been literally years. Adamancipator with 1 Block Dragon does absolutely nothing in the OCG right now. So I think that Block Dragon could come back to 1, and it would be totally fine. I think that while Block Dragon on release was extremely pushed and overpowered, the rest of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has now caught up to Block Dragon, and it is now totally fine. And, you know, because people always said, too, that, like, oh, Block Dragon can't exist because it limits the design space of rock monsters, which people don't say about Promethean Princess, despite limiting the existence of the design space of fire as a whole attribute. But, yeah, what have they done with that design space for rock monsters in that time? What has rock as a type done since Block Dragon got banned? Because, you know, people sure are still playing Adamancipator, right? Huh? It's like, I don't know. I don't think that this argument is necessarily invalid, that I think there are some situations, like, again, Promethean Princess, where a card is so powerful that it limits the design of everything that comes afterward. I just don't think that was true of Block Dragon. And even if it was, like, okay, let's design the good rock archetype and then ban Block Dragon right about the same time it comes out, right? Instead of, like, banning Block Dragon just to be like, oh, we could arbitrarily maybe design something a few years in the future and we just haven't seen any results of that, right? So, but even, again, all that aside, this card is fine at 1. Phantom of Yubel, this is one of only a couple of hits on the limited list, as opposed to things coming off from 0 to 1. But Phantom of Yubel, I think a lot of people can agree, should probably just be at 1. Well, really, they could have balanced this card by making you only able to summon 1 per turn. Like, if they just done that, this card would not have needed to be hit at all. But the fact that you can summon as many as you want from the extra deck per turn means that this card is not only an extender, a very, very good one at that, but also is still able to be a good end-board piece as well. I think if this card were at 1, or if, again, it had just been designed to only be able to summon once per turn in the first place, I think then we would have actually seen Phantom of Yubel be a very interesting support card for the deck, where you kind of have to make the choice of, do I want to extend with this, or do I want this card on my end board, right? But yeah, as it stands at 3 with its current design, I think it's a little bit overtuned. A little bit. I don't think Yubel as a whole is really that oppressive or powerful. I think this is the only hit I have to Yubel on this whole list, because I really don't think it needs any more. But again, I think we all kind of can agree that Phantom of Yubel as a card is pretty overpushed. Ib the World Chalice Justicar, the level 5 Synchro. Yeah, I mean, it's legal in the TCG and OCG. Don't know why it's not legal in Master Duel yet, but there's a lot of cool things you can cook with this card. So, plus me being known as Synchro enthusiast, would very much like to cook with this card. So I hope it comes off soon. Totally Awesome we already talked about when we talked about the banning of Ronin. Again, I'm pretty open to this still not being able to come back. Even if Ronin does get banned, I could still see a world where it might be a little overpowered and still needs to be at 0. Runic Tip, I'm going to talk about, I guess I can just talk about all the Runic cards in general because they're all right here, right? So, Runic Fountain to 2 is, I'm sure, going to be another very unpopular change that I'm going to make here. But, like, let's be real. I think we can all acknowledge at this point that stun cards are the problem, not Runic, as very evident by the fact that we hit all the Runic cards and then stun still exists, but now Runic decks are struggling. And the other thing about Runic decks is that there are a lot of very, very cool ones out there. I mean, Joshua Schmidt's out here showing us that left and right? How many different, very interesting Runic variants are out there. And, you know, this is something that, oh God, I'm going to put on my told you so hat again, because literally from the day Runic came out, you can go back and watch all of my older videos. I've been saying this the whole time, that floodgates are the issue, not the Runic cards. But I don't know, some people just don't like the idea of a mill strategy. I think that Runic is the best way you could do a mill strategy, right, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because if you mill cards by sending them to the graveyard, you're just feeding most decks, right? So banishing, I think, is the most meaningful way to do it. And it's not even like Runic is a turbo mill deck. It's very slow, methodical, does it over time. How many times have I seen people online say, like, I wish there was a good alt-win-con deck that wasn't just like broken and turbo out, but actually cared about a grindy game of achieving its win-con. And I'm just like, that's Runic! You're literally describing Runic! but I digress. So yeah, I think that Fountain can come back to 2, but I think if it does, you gotta limit Tip, which I think should have just been done in the first place, right? Especially because we live in a world where SP Little Knight exists now, and one Little Knight banishing your field spell should not mean the total end of your engine, right? Especially when that card that's banishing it is like literally the 3rd most popular played card of every single one of them out there. Only second, only behind Maxi and Ash Blossom. Yeah, so I think Fountain, again, if Tip goes to 1, then I think Fountain can come back to 2. Also, I put this Runic Destruction here because I always forget this card is at 1. Why? Why? Like, I do understand and also agree that in Master Duel, you need to probably semi-limit, you do need to semi-limit a lot of the Runic Quick Play spells to make sure there's not, like, a critical mass of them. Excuse me. So, I always thought it was weird that Runic Destruction is the one quick play spell that's limited and not semied for some reason, and not Tip. The spell Trap Destruction instead of the Searcher? Question mark? But okay. So that's kind of my stance on Runic and why I have these cards where I do. Just because, again, there's so many... And I'm not even somebody who enjoys Runic. I don't play Runic decks because even the fun variants, I find them quite boring. Like stuff like Ice Barrier Runic, or yeah, just stuff like Joshua Schmidt would play. I find the Runic engine quite boring to use. But, you know, unlike most Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, I don't let how much I like a card influence my opinion on its objective power level, which is like, I just wish more people did that. There are so many, it's kind of what makes a lot of discussions like this, for me anyway, almost a little bit bad faith with some people, is that like, so many of the cards will clearly be like, okay, so you just don't like this. That's why you want this card banned. It's because you just don't like it. But they'll never admit that. They'll always try to hide behind some like objective, like, no, it's toxic. It creates non-games. It's you know, just throwing out like all these buzzword phrases that they've heard other Yu-Gi tubers use. It's like, I don't know. I kind of just wish people open their minds up a little bit more, you know. So again, even though I don't like Runic, I still think that Fountain can be at 2 and it'd be fine. I actually have another example of that down here. I'll jump straight down to Flandres and M-Pen, right? I despise playing against Flu. I hate when they have M-Pen up. I think this card is so unfun to play into, and I don't find any joy in playing the Flandres deck myself. But that said, you know, I'm still willing and able to put my subjective feelings aside and be like, yeah, there's no reason for M-Pen to be at 1. It's not a card that is like that powerful, nor is Flandres as a whole, as a deck, that powerful. But even though I don't, and I can admit that, even though I don't like Flandres, again, I just wish the majority of other Yu-Gi-Oh! Players would be able to kind of do the same. But anyway, let's actually go into these unlimits as a whole here. Nimble Beaver I kind of touched on earlier. I talked about Sprite, but only for a moment. I mostly talked about Swap Frog, which again, if you ban Ronin, I think Swap Frog can definitely come back to 3. But Ronin, totally, and Swap aside, I think Nimble Beaver could just come back to 3. I think everyone can agree on that one, too. This is, I think, probably one of the most agreeable ones on here, as opposed to some of my more controversial takes. But, yeah, I think Nimble Beaver could totally come back to 3, and it wouldn't... Not only would it not do anything at all, as far as, like, making Sprite more OP, but, like, now that Nightmare Throne is out to search Dark Beckoning Beast, like, Nimble Beaver's not even necessarily the best level 2 engine you can be playing in a Sprite deck, right? Again, Nimble Beaver, I think, much like Wyvern Burster going to 0, the Nimble Beaver limit was so obviously Konami being like, all right, people, you have to play a different deck now, come on. It's just like, oh, hate it. Anyway, Swap Frog, where you talked about Mathmech Diameter. This is a card that I sometimes forget is at 1. I'm just like, yeah, that did so much to curb Mathmech. Not that Mathmech even really needed to be curbed, right? Like, Circular has been at 3 in Master Duel the entire time, and Mathmech is still, like, the 10th best deck right now. Maybe, debatably, like, maybe 7th to 10th, somewhere in there, but not even a top 5 deck with Circular still at 3. So it's like, what is Diameter at 1 really doing? Like, Mathmech would never even really play 3 Diameter before. You usually just played 2, so I think this and Parallel Exceed can both go back to 3, and, like, pretty much nothing would change about Mathmech as far as its current power level. I don't know why these cards are it just doesn't make any sense to me. Ido and Puppet, again, if you ban Albion Sanctifier, there's no reason for these cards to get hit. They can just be at 3. Just don't design cards like Sanctifier in the future. It seems pretty simple to me, but anyway. And Pen, we already talked about. I hate Flaunderies, but I'm also an objective thinker, so I'm capable of saying that, yep, even though I hate M-Pen and despise that card being on my opponent's field, the card should still be at 3. Change of Heart and Mageki are each at 2, and it's kind of like, why aren't they at 3? It wouldn't really change anything. And I think it might even give going second decks a little bit of a boost. So I think, why not? There's like, why not put these cards at 3? Fusion Destiny, why is this card at 2? If DPE as an engine generic has not been used in like over a year and a half at this point, pretty much. So I don't think there's really any reason for that card to be on the list at all. God forbid heroes get a little bit better. Oh yeah, we have another hero card on here, Mask Change too. I don't know why this card's been semi-limited since like Master Duel came out. And the only point in time at which you could maybe make an argument for that was when we were in a tier 0 format. But even then, people weren't really on Mask Change 2. It was kind of speculated as like, oh, you can go into Dark Law as a tier limit deck and that'll be really good in the mirror match. But there were better things you could do in the mirror match than that. Why on earth is Mask Change 2 at 2? And why has it been that way since the start of Master Duel? I don't think accessing Dark Law off a Dark Monster is that scary. Branded Opening is currently at 1, but if we ban Sanctifier, I think we can definitely give branded players some more tools, because again, I do acknowledge that Sanctifier is good for far more than just locking, right? So I think Branded Opening to 3 would be a good trade-off for them for that. And then Trickstar Light Stage. Another card that's been at 2 since the start of Master Duel, and it's like, why? Trickstars have done exactly nothing. Exactly nothing in the entire history of Master Duel. They can definitely have their field spell back at 3. I think that would be fine. So, okay, there it is. That is my Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban list, wish list for Master Duel. So again, feel free to let me know what you think in the comments below. But again, as always, as ever, I just really do ask that you be just be cool about it. If you can disagree, again, I actually do welcome that. I love the discourse, but just don't be rude about it. Which I don't think is too big of an ask, right? Right. You get it? You get it. All right. That's going to do it for now, though. Let's just move now to our outro. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Just want to give you a huge thanks for watching all the way to the very end of the video. Believe it or not, that is actually one of the best ways that you can support the channel, is by watching the videos in their entirety. But there are many ways in which you can support the channel if you are so interested. The names that you're seeing on screen here, I gotta give an extra special thanks to, because these are people who have chosen to either become a member on YouTube, which if you're interested you can do as well via the join button next to the subscribe button down there, or have signed up over on Patreon and become members there. Link to that is going to be in the description below. Without the support that is being offered by, again, all the people that you're seeing on screen right here, I would not be able to take the time to dedicate to uploading daily YouTube videos. So thank you so very much. But there are also other ways you can support as well. Again, link to the description below. If you like my deck tracker that you'll see in a lot of my videos, the Untapped Companion, you can download that for free, and if you use my affiliate link down there, then that also goes a long way towards supporting the channel. That's again free. So is subscribing here on YouTube. That's also free and a huge way to support. You can also check out Twitch, once again linked in the description below. Following and subscribing over there will not only support as well, but also give you notifications of when I go live if you want to catch some of the live streams. But really, no matter how you choose to support, it all adds up and it all definitely means the world. So thank you, each and every one of you. For now, this is Hexlex. I'm going to be signing out, but more than that, I'm hoping that you have a fantastic day.